They say every house has a voice. Some whisper in the pipes, others hum in the walls. But what happens when that voice learns your name and never stops calling it? This is the story of one man who thought he left his haunting behind, until the voice followed him. You're listening to The Voice That Never Left. Turn off the lights and listen carefully, because once you hear it, it's already heard you. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where people still waved at each other from their lawns. The air always smelled faintly of freshly cut grass, and every evening you could hear dogs barking somewhere down the street, a steady rhythm of normal life. My house sat at the edge of a cul-de-sac, an old two-story place my parents bought when I was 8. It creaked in the wind and had that faint wooden scent you only notice in older homes. I used to love it. At least I did, until the voice started. But that came much later. Back then, everything was ordinary. I was the oldest of 3 kids. My brother Sam was 5 years younger, and my sister Lily was still in elementary school. My parents worked long hours, Dad in construction, Mom as a nurse. So a lot of afternoons it was just me and the silence of the house. I'd sit in my room doing homework, the faint hum of the ceiling fan above me and the ticking clock on my desk the only sounds around. Sometimes, when the house got too quiet, I'd hear the faint murmur of the television downstairs or Lily humming to herself while coloring in the living room. It was a comforting noise until one afternoon when I realized neither of them were home. It was a Wednesday. I remember that because it was the same day the mail came late. I was upstairs finishing an essay when I heard someone talking downstairs. A voice, soft, low, like someone having a quiet conversation. I thought maybe Mom had come home early. So, I leaned back in my chair and listened. At first, I couldn't make out the words. Just the rhythm of speech, rising and falling. But when I stood and took a few steps toward the door, the voice stopped. Dead silence. I called out, "Mom." No answer. I walked down the hall, and the sound of my footsteps echoed slightly on the wooden floor. The house always felt bigger when it was empty, like the air stretched just a little too far between the walls. I checked the stairs, peering down into the dim light of the living room. Nothing. The TV was off. The front door was locked. When Mom finally came home that night, I told her I thought I'd heard someone talking. She smiled, tired, brushing it off. "You probably heard the radio from next door, sweetheart. You know how sound carries in these walls." That explanation made sense, at least enough for me to drop it. But something about the voice had felt closer, like it had been in the same room. The following weeks were normal again. School, homework, dinner, the same old routine. But every now and then, when I was alone, I'd catch small things, barely worth mentioning. A soft tap against the wall when no one was near it. A whispering sound in the vents, like air moving through words. Once, I thought I heard someone say my name. It wasn't clear, just a breathy syllable that could have been the wind. But it froze me. I turned, waiting for an explanation, but nothing was there. You learn to ignore small things in an old house. Pipes groan, wood settles, drafts whistle. But sometimes the silence feels too intentional, like something is holding its breath. One night, while doing my homework again, I heard the sound of footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate, measured. Not the scampering of a pet or the creak of the wind. Someone walking. I froze, staring at the ceiling. My parents were still out, and Sam and Lily were at a neighbor's sleepover. I told myself I'd imagined it, but then I heard it again, 3 steps, a pause, and then another 2. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a flashlight, and started up the stairs, my pulse pounding in my ears. The hall was empty, my bedroom door wide open, the air colder than before. I checked every room. Nothing. Still, I left the light on when I went to bed that night. Over the next few days, I noticed small changes. My bedroom door, which I always left slightly open, would sometimes be shut in the morning. My alarm clock blinked, 1200, even though there'd been no power outage. And then there was the whispering again. Always faint. Always just at the edge of understanding. I told Dad once, while he was fixing the kitchen cabinet. He didn't even look up from his work. "You've been watching too many of those ghost shows," he said, chuckling. Maybe he was right. But one evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long across my wall, I heard the whisper again. Only this time, it was clear. It said, "Don't go upstairs." I dropped my pen. My heart stopped. The voice was so close it felt like it had been spoken beside my ear. I didn't move for a long time. That was the first time I realized something in our house was wrong. Something was aware of me, and it didn't want me to go upstairs. For a while, I tried to convince myself it hadn't really spoken. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was just my mind catching the rhythm of wind through the vents again. But when you start doubting your own senses, you begin to pay closer attention. Too close. I started noticing how quiet the house became at certain hours. Between 200 and 300 a.m., there was a stillness that felt unnatural, like the walls were listening. I'd wake up sometimes without knowing why, heart already racing, eyes adjusting to the dark, waiting for something. Sometimes I thought I heard breathing, not mine slow and heavy, from somewhere close. But when I held my breath to listen, it always stopped. Days were fine, normal even. My parents argued about bills, Lily practiced piano, Sam ran around the yard with his friends. Life went on. But every night the atmosphere shifted. The corners of rooms seemed darker, sounds sharper. The first time something physical happened, it was subtle. I came home from school and noticed the living room clock had stopped at 12:07. Not strange, except that every clock in the house had frozen at that exact time. Digital, analog, even my phone showed no signal for nearly a full minute. Then everything ticked back to life, seconds, numbers, all moving again. I told Mom and she frowned, half listening as she folded laundry. Probably a power surge. Don't overthink it. She was right again, probably. But that didn't explain why the air in the house felt so heavy afterward. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard it again. A whisper. My name. Clear this time, drawn out like someone trying to get my attention. Ron. My whole body went cold. I turned over, eyes wide open in the dark. Who's there? No answer. The next morning, I told Sam about it while walking to school. He laughed and said, "You're losing it, man." Then he told me I should stop sleeping with the light on, because it made me look like a baby. That was how it went. Every time I tried to talk about it, someone brushed it off. By the weekend, the voice wasn't just whispering my name anymore. It had started saying short phrases, fragments like pieces of conversation from another room. Don't listen. They don't see. It's here. I wrote them down in a notebook once, thinking maybe I could make sense of them. But reading them in daylight made them sound ridiculous, so I tore the page out and threw it away. One afternoon, I was sitting at the kitchen table while Mom was cooking. I heard the faint sound of humming, soft and slow, like a lullaby, the same one she used to sing when I was little. "Mom, you still remember that song?" I asked, smiling. She looked confused. "What song?" "The one you're humming right now." She stopped stirring and stared at me. "I'm not humming anything, Aaron." The room went silent again. The air smelled faintly of gas and onions. For a second, I thought maybe she was joking. But she wasn't. Later that night, she asked if I'd been feeling stressed lately. Said maybe the new semester was getting to my head. I nodded, pretending that made sense. But deep down, I knew something else was happening. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen to the others too. But they wouldn't admit it. Lily started waking up crying, saying she heard someone call her from the hallway. Sam claimed he saw a shadow standing in the corner of his room one night. But when Dad turned on the light, it was gone. Then Dad himself got angry about his missing tools. His wrench, screwdriver, even his measuring tape vanished from the garage. A week later, he found them neatly lined up on the floor of the upstairs hallway. No one wanted to talk about it after that. We all just pretended things were fine, as if ignoring it could make it stop. But it didn't stop. Every night around midnight, the whispering came back. Sometimes it was just one voice. Other times it sounded like several, layered and overlapping, murmuring so faintly that I could almost make out words, but not quite. Once I heard laughing soft, low. I started sleeping with headphones on, music playing just loud enough to drown it out. But there were moments when the whispers still slipped through the songs, like static, like something hiding between the notes. I tried recording it. I set my phone on the nightstand one night and hit record before I fell asleep. The next morning, I played it back. For the first 3 minutes, it was just the hum of white noise. Then, at 3:12 a.m., a faint sound came through. A voice. It said, "I'm still here." My stomach dropped. When I showed the recording to Dad, he didn't even listen to it fully. He just sighed, deleted it, and told me to stop feeding this nonsense. That night, for the first time, I got angry. I stood in the dark hallway and shouted, "If someone's there, say it again!" The silence that followed was so deep it rang in my ears. I almost laughed at myself. Then, from upstairs, in that same calm tone as before, came the reply. I never left. I froze, every muscle in my body locking in place. The voice came from my old bedroom. When I finally forced myself to move, I turned off every light, locked the door, and sat on the couch until morning. No one believed me. But the voice had come back, and this time I knew it wasn't my imagination. After that night, something in the house changed. It wasn't just the voice anymore. It was the feeling that someone unseen was moving through our home, quietly but with purpose. I tried pretending life was normal, went to school, ate dinner, smiled when people spoke to me. But inside I was hollow. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow caught my eye. At night I barely slept. I started noticing small disturbances that no one else did. My bedroom window would be unlocked in the morning, even though I checked it every night. My shoes were moved, just slightly, but enough that I knew they'd been touched. And then came the smell. A faint metallic scent, like rust or blood, drifting in the hallways around 300 a.m. It was strongest near the stairs. No matter how much we cleaned, it came back. One night, after everyone was asleep, I woke up to the sound of whispering again. This time it wasn't distant. It was inside my room. I froze. My body wouldn't move. The whisper was right next to my bed, low, rhythmic, almost like someone speaking softly to themselves. I couldn't breathe. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it hurt. Then, clear as day, I heard it say, "I see you." The whisper was followed by the faint sound of movement, like bare feet sliding across the wooden floor. I shot up, grabbed the flashlight on my nightstand, and swung it around the room. The beam landed on my closet door. It was open. Just slightly. I hadn't left it that way. I held the light steady, every muscle shaking, waiting for something to move. But nothing did. I walked over, my legs barely obeying me, and yanked the door open. Empty. The smell of dust and something faintly rotten hit me. I barely slept after that. In the morning, I told my mom again. She looked pale but forced a smile. "You're having nightmares, sweetheart. You're overtired." Mom, I was awake. It spoke to me. She didn't respond. She just went quiet, folded her arms, and walked away. For the first time, I realized she wasn't ignoring it. She was afraid of it. Over the next few days, the house started to feel alive. You could sense movement in rooms when no one was there. Lights flickered even when bulbs were new. Once, while brushing my teeth, I saw the bathroom door slowly begin to close by itself, inch by inch, until it clicked shut. The air turned cold enough to see my breath. I stopped staying upstairs altogether. I slept on the couch in the living room with every light on. One night, Sam came downstairs, rubbing his eyes. "Can't sleep?" I asked. He shook his head. "Someone's talking in my room." I froze. "What do you mean talking?" He frowned, half asleep. "A man, he says he's looking for someone." I stared at him, my mouth dry. "What did he say exactly?" Sam shrugged, yawning. He said, "Where is he?" And then he laughed. He fell asleep beside me on the couch, but I couldn't close my eyes the rest of the night. By morning, I was done pretending. I told Dad everything. The whispers, the smell, the voice calling my name. He slammed his coffee mug on the counter and shouted, "Enough of this! It's an old house. You're scaring your brother and sister." But later that same night, something happened that made him stop doubting. It was around 20:40 a.m. I was half asleep on the couch when I heard Dad shouting from upstairs. I jumped up and ran. He was standing in the hallway outside his room, pale, shaking. "What happened?" I asked. He pointed at the end of the hall. There was someone standing there. "Ooh." He shook his head slowly. "I thought it was you." I followed his gaze, but the hallway was empty. Just a long stretch of darkness. For a moment, we stood there together, silent, both listening. The house groaned faintly, like wood under pressure. Then, softly, clearly, from behind us came a whisper. "I'm still here." Dad spun around, but no one was there. His face drained of color. We searched the entire house, attic, basement, every room. Nothing. After that, he never said it was just the house again. The next few nights were worse. The voice didn't just whisper anymore. It started imitating. Sometimes it sounded like my mom. Sometimes like me. One night, I heard Lily calling from upstairs. "Aaron, come here!" Her voice was urgent, shaky. I ran up immediately. But her room was empty. She was asleep in my parents' bed. The air in her room felt cold enough to burn. I stood there shaking, staring at the empty space, when I heard her voice again, right behind me this time. "Come here." I turned, flashlight trembling in my hand, nothing. Just the long, dark hallway stretching toward the stairs. The fear by then had become a part of daily life. You could feel it in the way everyone moved. Quieter, slower, always glancing at shadows. We stopped talking about it out loud, but everyone knew. Something was here. Sometimes I'd wake up and see my reflection in the hallway mirror, except it wasn't moving the way I was. It would lag behind just slightly, half a second off. Once, it smiled when I didn't. After that, I covered every mirror in the house. The line between sleep and waking blurred. I'd dream of the voice whispering my name, and when I opened my eyes, I'd still hear it. It no longer felt like it was outside me. It was inside my thoughts, weaving through them, twisting words, breathing between my heartbeats. And every night it said the same thing before I fell asleep. I never left. I remember the night it all came apart. The house had been quiet for 2 whole days, no whispers, no footsteps, no flickering lights. It was almost peaceful, and that's what scared me most. It felt like the calm before a storm you can't see but can already smell in the air. That evening, rain started. Heavy, pounding rain that hit the windows like gravel. The wind howled through the trees behind our yard, and every few minutes thunder rolled so deep it shook the floorboards. Mom was working the night shift. Dad had fallen asleep on the couch watching the news. Sam and Lily were upstairs. I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to read, but I couldn't focus. Every sound felt amplified. The ticking clock, the creak of the roof, even my own breathing. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the lights flickered once. Then again, then went out completely. The house fell into total darkness. "Dad," I called out. No answer. I used my phone's flashlight and started down the hallway toward the living room. The beam shook in my hand. That's when I heard it. Footsteps above me. Slow. Heavy, moving across the ceiling. "Sam, Lily," I yelled. The footsteps stopped. Then, from upstairs, a door slammed hard enough to rattle the picture frames on the wall. I ran to the base of the stairs, shining my light upward. "Guys." No response. Just the rain hammering the roof. Then came the scream. Lily's voice. Sharp, terrified, echoing down the staircase. "Aaron." I bolted up the stairs 2 at a time, nearly slipping on the wet wood. The hallway was pitch black except for flashes of lightning through the window. I could see shapes, doors half open, shadows that looked too tall to belong to anyone I knew. "Lily!" I shouted again. Another flash of lightning lit the hall for less than a second, and I swear I saw someone standing at the end of it. Not one of us. A tall, thin figure, grayish, almost transparent, its head tilted like it was studying me. Then darkness again. I heard it whisper. Not a word this time, just a breathy exhale, right by my ear. I stumbled backward, crashing into the wall. My flashlight hit the floor and rolled away, the beam spinning wildly. That's when every door in the hallway slammed at once. The sound was deafening. "Dad?" I screamed. He came running up the stairs, shouting, "What's happening?" But before he could reach me, the air around us changed. Colder, thicker, heavy with something electric. And then we heard it. The voice. It came from everywhere. The walls, the floor, the ceiling. Overlapping whispers, male and female. Hundreds of them, rising into a horrible, discordant chorus. Dad grabbed my shoulder. "Get the kids," and we ran to their rooms. Sam was sitting upright in bed, eyes wide, whispering something over and over. "He's in the corner, he's in the corner." I pointed my light. Nothing. Just the empty corner of the room. But then Sam's blanket began to lift. Slowly, as if someone invisible were pulling it off him. He screamed. Dad yanked him up and pushed him toward the hallway. "Go! Go!" We reached Lily's room next. She was huddled in the far corner, sobbing. The walls around her were vibrating, faintly at first, then harder. Like something trapped behind them was trying to get out. And then, between the cracks of thunder, the voice spoke again. Louder than before, resonant, full of static and hate. "I told you I never left." The sound came from every direction. I could feel it inside my chest, shaking through my ribs. Dad shouted over the noise, "We're leaving the house!" We started down the stairs, but the bottom step gave a loud crack, and the temperature dropped so fast our breath turned white. My phone light went out. Total blackness again. Then came the smell. That same metallic rot, stronger than ever, filling every breath. In the dark, I could hear my family's breathing. Quick, shallow, terrified, and behind it something else breathing too, deeper, slower, right next to us. I reached out, trying to find Dad's arm, but instead my hand brushed against something ice cold and smooth. It wasn't skin, it felt like glass or bone. That's when the screaming started, not from us. From it? A raw, distorted wail that shook the whole house. The walls seemed to pulse with it. Pictures fell. The lamp crashed. I could hear glass shattering somewhere. Dad dragged the front door open, yelling, "Run!" We stumbled out into the rain. Lightning flashed overhead, and for one brief instant I turned back. Through the window I saw something standing inside the house. Tall, gray, its face blurred like fog. It stood perfectly still, watching us. Then, as thunder cracked, the figure vanished. We didn't go back that night. We drove to my aunt's place across town, drenched and shaking. Dad called an electrician the next morning. then a priest, then finally silence. None of them found anything. The wiring was fine. The walls were solid. No mold, no gas leaks, no explanation. Mom cried when we told her. She said we'd had a collective panic. That fear spreads like sickness. But I could see it in her eyes. She didn't believe her own words. That night, we stayed at my aunt's house. None of us spoke. Sam refused to sleep unless all the lights were on. Lily wouldn't let go of my hand. When I finally started to drift off, the rain outside stopped. The air turned quiet. Too quiet. And then, faintly, from the dark corner of the guest room, I heard it again. Aaron. I sat up, my whole body shaking. It had followed us. We didn't go back to the house for almost a week. Everyone pretended we were just staying with family, but the truth hung over every meal and every sleepless night. None of us said the word haunted, yet we all thought it. The kids barely spoke. Dad chained smoked out on the porch, staring into nothing. Mom prayed quietly at the kitchen table until the candle burned low. On the 7th morning, Dad said we had to go back, just for a few hours, to grab clothes, documents, things we'd left behind. We can't live in fear forever, he said, though his voice didn't sound convinced. I didn't want to go, but I also didn't want them going without me. When we pulled up, the house looked different. The windows were still fogged from the storm, but the air around it felt hollow. No wind, no birds. The grass had turned a strange pale color, as if even the yard had gone cold. Inside, everything was untouched. The dishes still sat in the sink. The clock on the wall ticked normally again. For a few minutes, it almost felt like we'd imagined the whole thing. Almost. While Dad packed boxes in the living room, and Mom gathered Lily's clothes upstairs, I walked into my old room. Dust floated through the beam of light coming from the half-open curtains. My bed was still unmade, and my notebook lay on the desk where I'd left it. I picked it up and froze. Someone had written inside it. The handwriting wasn't mine. Scrawled across the first page, in shaky black ink, were 3 words. I'm still here. I dropped the book. It hit the floor with a soft thud. That was when the air changed again. The same metallic smell, faint at first, then stronger, filling my lungs. The walls seemed to hum, a low vibration deep in the wood. I ran downstairs. Dad, we need to go. Now. He turned toward me, confused. What's wrong? Before I could answer, the living room lights began to flicker. On, off, then stayed dim, pulsing like a heartbeat. Lily screamed from upstairs. Mom shouted her name. We ran toward the staircase, but the voice stopped us. It was louder than ever. Why did you leave? The words rolled through the entire house, shaking the windows. Sam covered his ears and cried. Mom grabbed him, whispering prayers that dissolved into sobs. Then, silence. A perfect, impossible silence. For a second I thought maybe it was over, until Dad took a step forward. His body stiffened. He turned his head slowly toward me, his eyes wide and unblinking. Aaron, he said, but it wasn't his voice. It was its voice, low, grainy, like something speaking through static. He smiled, a wide, unnatural stretch of his lips, and repeated, Aaron, don't go. Mom pulled Lily toward the door, screaming at me to move. I couldn't. My legs felt rooted to the floor. Dad, or whatever had hold of him, started walking toward me. His steps were wrong, jerky, like his body didn't fit right inside itself. Then, all at once, he collapsed. Just dropped. Mom rushed to him, shaking him, crying his name. After a few seconds, he blinked and gasped like he'd come up from underwater. What happened? He whispered. No one answered. We left the house again without another word. That night, back at my aunt's, we all slept in the same room. The TV played softly for background noise. Around 200 a.m., I woke to static on the screen. The image had frozen. White snow, faint gray shadows flickering behind it. Then, through the static, a voice came out of the speakers. You left me. Everyone woke at once. Dad lunged to pull the plug from the wall. The moment the TV went black, the house lights flickered, once, twice, then steady. For the rest of the night, we stayed huddled together, no one speaking. At sunrise, we left the city entirely. We moved into a small rental 2 towns away. Fresh paint, new furniture, new start. For a while it worked. The kids laughed again. Mom slept through the night. Even I began to believe maybe whatever it was had died with that house. But some things don't die, they wait. A month later, I woke up before dawn to a familiar smell, metallic, cold. I sat up, listening. The house was quiet, but in that quiet was something else. Soft breathing, just beside my bed. I turned slowly toward the sound. Nothing there. I told myself it was in my head. I forced myself back down, closed my eyes, and waited for sleep. Then, from somewhere inside the wall behind me, I heard it whisper, calm, steady, patient. You can leave the house, Aaron, but you can't leave me. The breath hit my neck like frost. I didn't scream. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling until the first light of morning. We still live here. The family doesn't talk about it anymore, though sometimes I catch Dad glancing at dark corners or Mom humming under her breath, like she's trying to drown out something she hears. Every night, before bed, I check the windows, the locks, the lights. Everything is perfect. Safe, normal. But somewhere between the hum of the refrigerator and the whisper of the air vents, I can hear it. Always the same. Always close. I never left. And that's where my story ends. Or maybe it hasn't ended at all. Because when you hear a voice in the dark and everyone swears it's only the wind, you'll remember this. Some voices don't come from outside the house. They come from what the house remembers. And once they find yours, they never leave.